Welcome to Black Swan Revelations. My name is Shane, and today we're going to be diving into the meaning of cloud of witnesses. What's going on here? Who are these cloud of witnesses? Who are they? So let's dive into the scriptures and go grab yourself a cup of coffee, grab yourself a Bible, and we're going to dive in. So let's go over to Hebrews chapter 12, and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure and give a thumbs up if you got something out of this, and feel free to share this with someone else, and then leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching this video from. Greatly appreciate it. So Hebrews chapter 12, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus as the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. It's interesting that here Paul the Apostle is telling us that we are actually surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. So you have to ask yourself, what are witnesses? Well, in Latin, witness is martyr. This is where we get martyrs, martyrdom, all this kind of stuff. It's the same thing as witness. So in Christianity, a lot of people in the past, present, and probably in the future, a lot of people die for their faith. And my question to you is, if you don't get persecuted to death, are you still a martyr? And I would argue the point that yes, you are still a martyr if you die in Christ. Not saying that you have to be killed to be a martyr, but because you're in Christ, you are a martyr. You're a martyr. Why? Because we are dead because of what Christ did for us on the cross. And we believe that we died. We believe that we were baptized into his death. And we believe that we also rose again, just like Jesus did. So this is what our faith is. This is the foundation of our faith, is that we are believing that Jesus Christ died and rose again from the dead. So as a Christian, when you believe something like that with all your heart, you're a witness to his resurrection. Why are we a witness? Because we're preaching that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. So when you preach something, you don't preach something that you don't believe in, that you don't believe is true. Because if you do that, if you preach something that you're not believing in, you're actually a false witness. A false witness is someone that is making up something that they didn't witness, that they didn't see with their own eyes. This is why it's important to have an eyewitness at the scene of a crime, and preferably two or more people. That'll help the judgment, because otherwise if it's just one person, it's he said, she said. But if you have two or more people, now it is whatever happened there, you can actually justify what they're saying because you have two or more witnesses. So it's kind of interesting. You can play a lot with the word martyr and witness. You can interchange them. So if you think about it, and you could think, okay, well, we're not a martyr here in Western society because we have to die for our faith and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, if you're going along that road, down that bunny trail, if you will, of the idea that you're not a martyr until you actually die for Christ, what do you do with what Martha was saying to Jesus Christ? And when Jesus responded, like, she's basically saying, like, if you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Mary said the same thing. And Jesus said, I am the resurrection. Like, I am the life. And whoever believes in me will never die. Do you believe in this? And Martha said, yeah, I believe. I believe in the resurrection and all this stuff. And that's when Jesus said, I am the resurrection. So, if we believe in him, we don't die because he tasted death for us. How can we be a martyr? Well, we're a martyr because we're a Christian. We're a Christian because we believe in his death, burial, and resurrection, that he shed his blood on the cross. And we believe in his death. And so the same thing, we are participating in his death on the cross. So now we're a martyr. We are a Christian. We are a witness for what Jesus Christ did on the cross. So some people might say something like, you have to give your life. You have to sacrifice your life for Christ. And I say, the greatest sacrifice you can give God is to live for him, because we are living sacrifices. Interesting, right? How could it be a living sacrifice when a sacrifice, by definition, is something that gets killed? Because Jesus died for us, and he has made us living sacrifices. We are living martyrs. We are living witnesses. And if you think about it, in the old days, the Old Testament, there were times where, when, let's just give a specific example, and we'll tie this in with the clouds. But sometimes I like to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully this will kind of put things all into perspective for you. So you have King David, who fled from King Saul, and I've shared this story before. He joins allegiance with the Philistines and moves himself right up the ranks. I think he was probably equal or just under the generals of the Philistines. And their worry was that King David would fall away back to Saul. He would switch allegiances from the Philistines to Israel, because he was pretending to work for the Philistines. Meanwhile, he was killing the Philistines. So he was like a spy, and he was doing all kinds of damage to the Philistines, unbeknownst to them. And every time King David would come upon a city to take them out, he would make sure and kill everybody. Everybody. Why? Because he didn't want to leave any witnesses to what he was doing. He was coming against the Philistines. And if he left a witness, that person would rat him out to the Philistines, and say that King David is not who he says he is. He's actually killing us. A rat. Interesting, right? And the first time we see a rat is from when King David went to go get a sword from one of the priests. Basically, he pretended that he was on a mission from King Saul, and it was so urgent that he didn't have enough time to get any food or to get any weapons or anything. And the priest said, well, the only thing that we have here is like the showbread. That's it. That's all we have. And he said, you can have it. And King David said, do you guys have any weapons here? And the priest said, the only thing that we have is the sword that you killed Goliath with, or his sword. We have Goliath's sword. And King David said, there is no sword like it. Like, this is an awesome weapon. So he grabbed the sword and left. And there was an Edomite, not an Edomite, forget what his name is. But basically, there was a guy there that was detained, probably because he did something wicked, but he was detained, and he witnessed King David showing up, and he may not have heard the conversation, but he saw them interacting and then thought this was a time for me to get promoted by King Saul. So that he went to King Saul and said, I witnessed, basically, King David talking to the priest, and the priest helped him out and gave him a word from the Lord as well to help him, and gave him weapons, gave him food and everything, and shelter, whatever. Like, he just ratted him out. And then when King Saul approached the priest, he said, did you give a word to King David? And the priest said, I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea. That's basically between you and King David. He asked me for food. I gave him food. I wasn't aware that he was on the bad side of you. So King Saul said, well, I have to kill you and all your family. So he told his men, strike all the priests down, kill them all, because they're supporting King David, and they wouldn't do it. King Saul's men wouldn't do it. But this guy, this Doeg, I think his name was, decided to, or he was there by Saul, and Saul said, you kill him. So this guy killed all the priests. And when David found out about it, because one of the servants escaped, an eyewitness to what was going on, came to King David and said, King Saul killed all the priests, and it was at the hand of this guy. And King David knew it. He said, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. I knew this guy was going to rat me out. Should have took him out. He was a witness to me showing up, and I actually put all the priests in harm's way. So put that on my account, basically. And you'll be under my protection now. Don't go back, because I made a mistake. I shouldn't have trusted that guy. I knew he was there, probably in the background as well. So we're talking about witnesses and martyrs. So again, David didn't want to leave any witnesses of what he was doing, so he killed them all. So in some ways you could say they're like martyrs. So when we talk about a cloud of witness with Paul, these are all people that have died in the faith, hoping for something better, a better resurrection, a better body. They're hoping one day that they're going to get a new heavenly body that's designed by Jesus Christ himself. That's the hope. It's not just living with Jesus Christ, but it's also a redemption of our new heavenly bodies. Why? So that we can live in heaven as well with him forever. Because in John 14, Jesus said, I'm going away, but because you guys' hearts are heavy right now, I'm telling you, like, I'm going away, but I'm also bringing a comforter. Like, unless I go, comforter can't come. And then he also mentions the idea that I'm going away, and believe in me, like, believe me, like, I'm telling you the truth. I'm going away. In my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you. So you can trust me. I am a witness to you guys that my Father has a mansion that is full of dwelling places, and I'm going to prepare a place for you to dwell. What is that? I believe it's not just a physical building, but I believe it's actually our spiritual bodies, because in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says we basically have two bodies. We have the natural body, which is earthy, and we have a spiritual body, which is heavenly. So when we ditch this tabernacle, we are eagerly waiting and anticipating for our heavenly tabernacle, where it'll clothe us, it'll clothe our spirit. When does that happen? Well, it happens when we die physically, when this body dies. That's when we get our new heavenly body. That's what we call the resurrection. This is the foundation of our faith, is the idea that when Jesus died, he rose again, and he is the first fruits of all those that sleep in Christ. And one day Jesus Christ is coming back for us so that we can be caught up together with those that are in the air. So we're going to just dive into 1 Thessalonians 4. I want to show you this. This is kind of interesting here. Because if you're thinking, like, you got to look at the idea of the cloud of witnesses are people that have died in the past. Because that's directly what Paul is talking about. He just gave a list of all these people that died in faith. So those make up a cloud of witnesses. And one day Jesus Christ is coming back with those people from heaven to meet us in the air so that we can be forever with Jesus Christ, forever and ever and ever. So let's go to 1 Thessalonians 4. Verse 13. But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we, which are alive and remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. Them in the clouds. That's the witnesses. That's the martyrs. That's the cloud of witnesses. So we're going to be caught up with all the martyrs for Jesus Christ. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. Wow, isn't it amazing that these words are comforting? Are they not comforting to you? They're comforting to me. I love this. This is one of my favorite chapters. So comforting. So some people might go, well, prevent just means that they're dead in the ground right now, these bodies, and we're coming back to get these bodies. We're coming back to pick them up, and then we're going to take those bodies to heaven because God is going to jumpstart the physical bodies that have decomposed into dust, scattered through the winds and all over, just basically into the ground. They become basically dust of the earth, that we're coming back. That's what a lot of people that you talk to, they say, oh yeah, we're coming back for these bodies. And yet there are people coming in the clouds that are martyrs for Christ. They're alive in heaven. We get that. But Paul says that we're not preventing those that have died, that have slept in Christ, from, like, he's bringing them back. So the word prevent is kind of interesting because over time we kind of look at it as we're holding something back or whatever. And the idea is that the people in the ground, their bodies, awaken at the same time as us. So those of us that are alive and remain, these people that are in the ground get resurrected right here. But if you think about it, if Christ is coming back to get us, whatever you believe, post, mid, pre, post, mid, pre, mid, post, trib, Everyone believes that Jesus Christ is coming back to get us, those of us that are alive, that remain. Where the problem is, people will say, well, we get caught up in the air at just after these people get resurrected and we're right there. But Paul says we're not preventing them. So you can't have even 1 nanosecond of these people that are in the ground to raise 1 nanosecond and then we're up in the air as well. Because that's the only way that, because otherwise you're forced to say it happens at the same time. And Paul's saying prevent. So then when people say, oh yeah, it's just a nanosecond, it's one millionth of a second, that's when they go up and then we catch up to them. It's so fast, it's in the twinkling of an eye. That's not what Paul's saying. Just think about it. He's bringing these people back with him. Where did they live? They lived in heaven. And again, most people understand the idea that when we die, we go to heaven. Where the problem is people think that we are ghosts in heaven. But we are not ghosts. We are complete. How do we know this? Well, Jesus Christ finished his work on the cross. He said, it is finished. It's not just beginning, it's finished. So he is the first fruits of those that sleep. He's the first fruits of those that sleep in Christ. He's the first fruits. So if you understand what first fruits are, basically it's the first of the harvest that you reap. And you give that to the Lord. And then the other 90% is yours. You don't give God 100%. You give God 10%. And you keep the 90, and that's what you live off of. That's why many people say, well, 90% with God is better than 100% without God and all this kind of stuff. That's where we get the idea. Because otherwise you're saying you're giving all your money to God, all 100%. And that's not what happens. Like just using logic, that's not what we do. We give 10% to God. And you can argue and say, well, now you're under the law for giving and whatever. I'm talking about when you tithe means 10%. It doesn't mean 100%. But yet we say that we are giving 10% and we're giving 90% to God. That's what we're talking about when we say things about the resurrection. We're saying, yeah, it's only this part because it's only Jesus that's in heaven complete, but we're not complete until the other 90% shows up, which is what they say is the resurrection from the ground. That we got to come back. So we're only 10% in heaven, meaning we're just a spirit, but we're waiting for 90% back on earth. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We're 100% in heaven. In fact, you can argue that we're 100% right now. We are a martyr. We are a witness right now. It's just that we're in this tabernacle, and this tabernacle is going to dissolve one day. And the second we die in this body, our spirit is unclothed from this body, but we're suddenly clothed upon. How fast does that happen? That happens in the twinkling of an eye. That's how fast the resurrection is. And the resurrection has been happening for the past 2,000 years. Which is interesting because even Christ went and preached to people even before he died on a cross. That's an interesting thing. I believe he preached all the way back to Adam because he has the keys of death and hell. And whatever door he chooses to open, he opens, and whatever door he chooses to close, he closes, keeps it closed. So which doors is he opening? Well, all those that believe in him, they're no longer trapped in hell. As in, before, there used to be a resting place where people would go, good or bad. They had these little resting places. So now, Jesus unlocked all those doors for people to believe in Jesus Christ. It goes all the way back to, even back to righteous Abel, all the way back to Adam and Eve. Preached. And he kept doors closed for those that reject him. They don't come back to life until after the millennium kingdom, after the 1,000 years of the reign of Christ on earth. Then those doors get opened up, and the sea gives up its dead, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. There's lots going on with the word sea in the book of Revelation. And those are all the people that don't know Christ, that rejected him, I should say. They heard him, they heard his word, but they chose to reject him on every level. And many took the mark of the beast as well. They are sentenced to the lake of fire. So we see this in Revelation where the dead, death and hell, cough up their dead, the sea coughs up their dead, and death and hell get tossed into the lake of fire. This is the second death. Blessed are they that are of the first resurrection, or partake of the first resurrection. Why? Because they don't have to participate in the second death. So if you just think about it, there are people that are twice dead. What does that mean? You die once, and then you die again, a second time. When? In the lake of fire. That's the second death. You don't want to be those that die the second death, that are participating in the second death. So that tells you that there are two resurrections. There is a resurrection of those to everlasting life, and then there's a resurrection of those unto everlasting shame and condemnation. That's the lake of fire. So you can't look at it from the perspective of two kinds of deaths, but you look at it that there are two times of deaths. The first one is while we're here in this physical body, and then there's a second death of all those that reject Jesus Christ. They get tossed into the lake of fire. And there's two resurrections. The first resurrection is all of those that don't go into the lake of fire. All those that participate in the second death, or the first death, I should say. All those. And those that are remain alive, we will be translated as well. Just like Enoch was. He was translated so he didn't see death. And when you think about it, back to Martha talking to Jesus, Jesus like, all those that believe in him will never die. So, lots going on, right? Lots going on. The point is, there's two resurrections. There's the resurrection of the quick, and there's the resurrection of the dead. They're in the dead state, and they're getting tossed into the lake of fire. We are quickened. When this body dies, we're quickened. Why? Because we get planted into the ground, and Jesus, the last Adam, is the quickening spirit. And because we know him, we will live forever. We are joint heirs in Christ. We have a seat in heavenly places. So when you think about the word prevent, the idea is like if you go today, you're like, oh, we're how do you prevent forest fires? How do you prevent your grass from burning up? Well, you water it. So this is what we understand prevent means today. But it came from the idea of preventing, meaning anticipating something coming forth. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say if you have grass right now that is dried up, you have green grass right now, but you don't want it to turn brown. So you anticipate that it's going to turn brown, so you water your grass daily. Why? You're preventing your grass from turning brown. But that's what prevent means. You anticipate that it's going to turn brown, so you take an action today in order to take care of that. That's called preventative maintenance, if you will. So this is the same thing. If you think about back in Solomon's day, he was a king. Everything was taken care for him even before he thought about it. Like, he didn't have to worry about what meal he was going to eat the next day. The servants the day before were already preparing a meal for King Solomon, and all his sons and all his people that he put in place for all the territories all over Israel. There was nothing lacking in King Solomon's kingdom. He never lacked anything. In fact, people were bringing tributaries from other nations as well, bringing gold, bringing apes, peacocks, all this kind of stuff. They were bringing it to him. Why? Because he's a king. They're preventing him from having any needs. They are anticipating that in the future he's going to need something. So that's why they would bring everything together. That's what people do for the king. It's what people do for the president, leaders in politics, all this kind of stuff. You anticipate that they need something, so they're taken care of, salary, whatever. They don't have to worry about their money because they have a job to do. So everything is taken care of. They don't have to worry about it because their money is being dumped into their bank account, just like you when you go to work. Your boss prevents you from starving, hopefully, by giving you your reward in the form of a payment, a paycheck. That's preventing. He's anticipating that because you've done the work, you're going to need a paycheck because it's owed to you. So this is what Paul is saying in 1 Thessalonians 4, that we will not prevent, we're not going to hold them back because they're already in heaven. There's nothing that we can do right now today that's going to keep those people in the ground. Like, we're not waiting on anything. We're not preventing those people from going into heaven. They're not waiting for us. And I think, again, most people understand that, the idea, but somehow they cut it close and they say, well, no, they actually, their bodies, which are dissolved, come up almost at the same time as us, and will be caught up to meet them in the air at the same time. Well, if you're saying it's at the same time, you're not reading what Paul's saying, that we're not preventing those that slept. So you can't say it's right now that they're still asleep. You have to logically infer that it's people that have died over the past 2,000 years. Because Paul goes on in 1 Corinthians 15 saying, look, there were many witnesses, many martyrs of Jesus Christ and what he did on earth, and they also witnessed his resurrection. They also witnessed him going back to heaven. And some of those witnesses are asleep, although most of them are still alive. So if you don't believe me, you can ask them, did they see Jesus? Yes. They saw him over a period of 40 days. He appeared to over 500 people. Those are witnesses. Those are martyrs for Jesus. And we know today all those people are dead. So again, if you just use logic, it's all those that have slept in Christ. They're not waiting for us. They're in heaven with their new heavenly bodies. There's nothing that they're waiting for in heaven. They have their new heavenly bodies. Otherwise, they would be floating around in heaven trying to high five Jesus Christ, and they just keep missing because their hands float past Jesus. They can't give him a hug for thousands of years because they're in heaven with Christ. And if you're saying they're spirits, that means Paul the apostle and all the other apostles are in heaven waiting for us to get raptured in order for them to get these dirt bodies that are in the image of the first Adam. You can't have it any other way. If you're saying we're waiting, Paul's saying we're not waiting, or they're not waiting for us. We're not preventing them. Post-tribbers would say we're preventing them because they're in heaven as spirits. They don't have their heavenly bodies, and they're coming back, and in one day is the resurrection, where these people are coming up from the ground, from their graves, with their bodies that are jump started, and they come back to life, and we are raised to go and meet Jesus in the air, and we're coming back, not to go live in heaven. They have a hard time with that there's people living in heaven right now. They don't want to believe that. They look at it and they go, oh yeah, they're spirits. But it's kind of confusing because in Revelation, we see them getting robes and they're throwing down crowns and they're on their knees and they're weeping and they're waving palm branches. These are all things that kind of remind us of a body. You're like, yeah, they must have some other body. Yeah, they have a spiritual body. First comes the natural, then comes the spiritual body. So they are witnesses because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. They are martyrs. So today, we are martyrs for Christ, whether we live or die in him. We are martyrs. We are living sacrifices. Where do you think the idea of sacrifice comes from? It comes from the idea that when you kill an animal, you're sacrificing it to a deity, or in our case, to God. If you're going back to the Old Testament, that's called a sacrifice. For what? Because you messed up. So you kill an animal, you sacrifice that animal. But we are living sacrifices. We are living stones. Peter being one of the first stones, Petra. We are living stones, can't be killed. This is what I believe Jesus Christ is giving us when we die physically. When this body keels over, we are getting a new stone as a body, a living stone, a morning star, if you will. So I know we covered a lot of territory, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea as to what we're talking about when it comes to witnesses. We are living witnesses. We are living martyrs. So you can be 100 years old and die in your sleep in a hospital or whatever. You're still a martyr for Christ. You don't have to be killed by people to prove something. And this is where, again, a lot of post-tribbers are saying endure unto the end. And meanwhile, Jesus goes on to talk about in what the end is. It's Jacob's trouble. That's the end. So in Luke 21, Jesus says, pray that you're counted worthy to escape before these things come to pass. What things? The end. Because Jesus said in Matthew 24 that there's all these things coming upon the earth, birth pains and all this stuff, but he's like, don't be troubled. That's not the end. The end is coming. The end is near. We're not in the end. We're in the latter days, but we're not in the end. The end is coming, which is Jacob's trouble. So this is why today we are dead in Christ. We participated in his baptism of death. That's what we're baptized into his death. Otherwise, if we're not baptized into his death, why are people being persecuted for his faith? Why are we preaching a resurrection if we're not baptized into the same death that he went through? We're participating into his death. That's what baptism of the dead means. We're baptized into his death and resurrection. So that's it for today. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you have, make sure and subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and feel free to leave a thumbs up as well. I'll see you later. Bye for now.